My first guest is someone who is deciding in the next few weeks whether he will jump in. And in the run-up to a possible announcement, Governor Chris Sununu hasn't been afraid to throw a punch or two or three. He certainly didn't hold back when I sat down with him this week. The former president was, of course, in your home state for a town hall this week. He repeated the big lie, called January 6th a, quote, beautiful day, mocked a person who he sexually assaulted, according to a jury. I know you said you vote for him if he's the nominee, but watching that, hearing that, I mean, is that still
Well,
what
he's not going to be the nominee. I used to say that's a hypothetical, but I think everyone's kind of reassessing, even some of his supporters are saying, well, okay, this can't be the message. This is a terrible message with a terrible messenger. Donald Trump does not define the Republican Party. I don't think any one individual ever defines the party, right? It's about those pillars, about what we're about at our core.
You've said this many times, that he is not going to be the nominee. But right now he's ahead by double digits, by a lot.
Against who?
Against Ron DeSantis, against Nikki Haley, against his former vice president.
Yeah.
So what exactly is going to stop him? Is it you?
No, I guess my point is there's so many other candidates to get in the race. There's so many more parts of the discussion. We haven't had a single debate yet. In fact, we won't even have a debate for the next 2 or 3 months. And then you'll have maybe a dozen debates. We'll go to Iowa and New Hampshire, and all of this politics is yet to play out. There'll be more indictments on his side and more distractions and everything. And I think the opportunity is for candidates to talk about, not just talk about the Trump thing, but to actually show themselves, show their personality, show their opportunity, their record of success. I think this is just a huge opportunity and a lot more political game to be played for candidates, whoever they may be, to get on the race, get on that debate stage and see where it falls. Maybe I do it, maybe I don't.
You're still deciding.
Yeah, I'd love to be on that debate.
You're welcome to tell me now if you're going to run for president, of course. But what would be your first critique of Donald Trump?
Well, I think a lot of folks say, well, I'm going to go back to 2016. I saw a lot of candidates try to debate him on policy. Look, you don't debate Donald Trump on policy. The guy has massive insecurities. He's a loser, and he lost many times. He lost races in New Hampshire, not just for himself, but for my fellow candidates. He really got behind really bad candidates that were extreme, that obviously couldn't win in November. If you can't win in November, then we shouldn't even be in the discussion, and he can't win.
You think the best argument is he's a loser?
Yes, because he can't win.
I did want to ask you about a scene from the town hall this week, which one of the things that struck me was the laughter in the audience, particularly when Trump was talking about E. Jean Carroll. Someone, a jury, says he sexually abused, defamed, and now has to pay her $5 million. Now, you were not involved in making up the audience, but these are people in the audience from New Hampshire, Republicans in New Hampshire, undeclared voters in that room. I was curious just what your reaction was when you saw the laughing.
Right? Now, I can understand as the camera panned through that audience, I knew pretty much everybody in that. They're all Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Right? So the audience was absolutely filled with Trump supporters. So I wasn't surprised to hear the support. But when you're talking about a serious issue like that and laughter and mocking and all that, it's completely inappropriate, without a doubt. And it doesn't shine a positive light on New Hampshire. But again, understand what the audience makeup was.
Large percentage of Trump supporters.
Oh, I would say almost all of them. Yeah.
So you are contemplating running for president. So I want to dive into a bunch of the issues that you've talked about and you have positions on. Trump was asked repeatedly if he'd sign a national abortion ban if it came to his desk. He wouldn't say. I mean, he was asked repeatedly. Can you categorically say you would or wouldn't sign an abortion ban?
Not only would I not sign a national abortion ban, but nobody should be talking about signing a national abortion ban. Look, Dobbs said that states are going to can make their own decisions, so they will. And this is not a national argument where the pro-life is ever going to win or the pro-choice movement is ever going to win. It's never going to be won. So let's have those battles at the state level. What Mississippi wants is probably very different than California or New Hampshire or New York or Missouri. So let the states decide, because the accountability of those decisions by the governors and the legislature are held directly with those voters. If they don't like it, they can make the change. That's actually good government. That's what again, I don't think the founding fathers had battles on abortion rights envisioned when they created this country. But the process by which we hammer out tough issues should always be handled at a more localized level, because the voters have more power, they have more say, they can design the path for their communities in a much better way, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all out of that building over there. That's rarely the answer.
So moving on to other things, you have an A rating from the NRA, not something you've run away from. You went to the NRA convention just a few days after 3 kids were killed in a school shooting in Nashville. There have been, of course, a number of mass shootings over the last few years. Why did you think it was important to go and be there?
Well, Look, I wouldn't say it was important to be there, but it's a large constituency. New Hampshire has, I would say, a very strong record on supporting individuals' rights around the Second Amendment and gun rights. And there's, 60,000 people there or whatever. A lot of our manufacturers were there. And, it was good to go and kind of talk about our record of success, not just around laws, but around the individual freedoms that drive that. If you those mass shootings, I'm a governor, right? So I'm 24/7. God forbid there's a mass shooting. It could happen to anyone at any time, anywhere in this country. There's no law you're going to pass that's going to stop mass shootings. There's no law you're going to pass that's just going to magically stop gun violence. That's clear.
Do you think there are federal restrictions on guns that should be the law of the land?
I think that where the laws are right now are pretty good. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you some of the New Hampshire laws, because you're the expert on it and you know how guns are thought of in New Hampshire. So in 2019, you vetoed 3 gun safety bills passed by the state legislature. One of those bills would have prevented guns on school property. It would have required parents to leave their guns in the car when picking up their kids from school. So to me as a parent, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. What doesn't make sense about that?
Well, it's public property.
So parents should be allowed to bring guns into schools?
Well, technically they can. Yeah.
But why would that be something that would make kids safer or teachers safer?
I'm not saying it's making people safer, but it would be pulling away an individual's right when they have the right to do that on public property and public grounds.
So it's freedom, or it's right to be able to. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think teachers, because one of the things that President Trump called for was hardening of schools.
Yes.
Do you think more teachers should be armed in schools?
If you have training programs and a training program and a system where a teacher can be armed, and again, there's, that's a real possibility if you don't have other school resource officers. Otherwise, you can bring in outside school resource officers, or if a teacher wants to be trained and you have a system in place to get appropriate training, not just a guy, Mr. Smith, the calculus teacher, carries a gun. You got to have right training and protocols and all of that. And we've made tens of millions of dollars of investment in New Hampshire around the hardening of our schools, around investing in safety. It isn't just about whether someone has a gun in the training or not. We have that, of course, but it's really about lockdown systems, communication, safe doors, all that sort of thing. Those things can sound small, but in the moment of that crisis, they can be very big deals. So we take that very seriously.
Well, teachers across the country don't necessarily want to be armed. They've been pretty outspoken
if they don't want to be, then
about
they
it. And police groups, they are not calling for more teachers to be armed, nor are first responders calling for more teachers to be armed. So I'm just calling that out as like a solution.
Well, I'm not calling for
more
teachers to be armed, other than to say if schools should have the ability to provide some type of resource officer, some type of safety protocols, and an officer, whether it's being armed or not, whatever they think is the right thing to do. And if it's a teacher then that has the right training and protocols and they want to allow that, then that's fine. I don't think we should be handing out guns to teachers per se, but if there's a teacher that has that training and experience and can provide that resource and the school's okay with it, I have no problem with it.
So another issue close to your heart, you call yourself a fiscal hawk.
Yes.
You may need a T-shirt or something like that.
There you go.
In the town hall this week, former President Trump also urged the House Republicans to force a debt default if the Democrats don't agree to spending cuts. Given how catastrophic that would be, is rooting for that the right thing right now in terms of a message?
No. No one should be rooting for a default. Let's take a little step back. I can tell you, one of my biggest frustrations with this town is I think 98% of people in that building right there don't have an economic sense. I think there is a massive economic illiteracy. I can't even get the word out. Massive economic illiteracy in Washington, D.C. And that has real repercussions to everyday citizens, to families, to local banks, to local small businesses. Defaulting on the debt would be catastrophic. It would send a chain of reaction of events across the country that would really freeze everything up. It would be terrible. Republicans typically don't like to increase, our debt limit, right? We want to be more fiscally responsible. I support that 100%. So the fact that Republicans,
unless there's a Republican president and they voted for it 3 times under Trump, but
and I agree. And again, they should have. I don't mind increasing the debt limit as long as there's some cuts. Like Republicans are giving in. They're saying, well, we don't really want to increase it, but we'll capitulate. We'll negotiate. We'll give you something. We'll increase that. But you got to show that there's some fiscal discipline instilled back in the country and in the federal government, and that comes with control and spending.
Well, the biggies, as you know, because you're a fiscal hawk, are defense spending. Would you be open to defense spending? Cutting defense spending, I should say.
I wouldn't. I don't. If you start saying, well, education spending versus dispense, look, I think you can find massive efficiency in spending in every department.
But there are very big buckets, as you know, that have the most size.
Sure.
So defense spending or cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those would be the biggest buckets. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump around a little bit. You just brought up Social Security. Social Security, 23% cut in Social Security benefits are coming 8 years from now. That's in the law. That is fact. That's happening. Every senior in America should be very concerned that Joe Biden says, I'm not doing anything about it. Even Donald Trump says, me neither. They're joining at the hip saying massive cuts are coming to Social Security benefits and we're not doing anything about it. How about a candidate that steps forward and say, we're going to fix that. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to create opportunity. Efficiency in the system.
Well, you've talked about that. I mean, you've talked about supporting privatizing Social Security. Is that something?
It's not just about privatizing. I mean, that's kind of an easy answer. It's really about creating other opportunities, options for the individual in terms of how they invest their dollars and ensuring that we can get kind of the fiscal house back in order before these 23. This 23% cut isn't coming 2 decades from now. It's literally coming 8 years from now. Well, Biden and Trump just don't care.
It requires tough political conversations, which we have not.
I don't think it's that tough.
Well, but you've not shied away from. Yeah. Would you be open to raising the retirement age?
I think if someone wanted to move the retirement age, look, did they do it in France? Did they do it in Chile? They did it in all these other countries without a problem. Now, do you have to move it to 70? No, I don't think you have to go that far. You can look at the actual numbers, but the retirement age hasn't moved in decades, or maybe ever. I don't know. You'd probably know better than I. So I think there's just a lot of other doors that have to be opened and addressed and talked about.